Today's guest has faced more significant life challenges than the majority of us. That includes her experiences in childhood, surviving the Asian tsunami, and achieving remission after a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. She believes that she survived all of this because she's here for a greater purpose. She is here to make an impact on the world. She now says, and I'm quoting her here, that you can surf those waves of life. You can get the most out of life. You can experience more joy, more peace, more purpose than you've ever experienced before. She believes that every challenge is an opportunity for growth, and she provocatively asks us, what if in your darkest hour you find your greatest strengths? Annie Naqvi is an inspiration who is now on a mission to empower over 250,000 leaders to have a positive impact on the world by living their lives with greater purpose, joy, and mental freedom. I am sure that you are going to be impacted by this conversation. Enjoy. Hey there. Welcome to the Burnout Isn't Necessary podcast, where we delve into the world of stress, burnout, and the science behind it all. Over a decade ago, I faced burnout as a management consultant, experiencing an emptiness that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But here's the truth. My burnout wasn't necessary, and it's not necessary for you either. I'm Hannah Holden, and together with my amazing guests, we share our real-life experiences with stress and burnout. We explore the science behind stress, offering practical tips to help you navigate those challenging moments in life. Our goal? To empower you to prevent burnout from taking over your life. I am passionate about stress mastery and preventing burnout, and I am here to guide you to a more balanced, fulfilling life. So let's go. Burnout isn't necessary, and I'm here to show you why. So, welcome back and welcome. I am joined today by Annie Naqvi. Annie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Hannah.
So, for those of you who don't know, Annie is a dedicated executive transformation expert. She specializes in supporting CEOs, founders, and senior executives to increase their productivity tenfold, whilst enhancing their self-care and well-being and ultimately reducing the risk of burnout. So, Annie, I was hoping that you could start by elaborating on who it is that you work with and how you work with them.
Sure, Hannah. So I work with high-achieving CEOs, founders, C-suite level executives, and senior executives to, as you say, to help them increase their productivity while reducing their risk of burnout. And I work with people on a wide range of different areas to do with executive coaching, work-life balance, in terms of leadership skills, executive presence, communication skills, all of those usual kind of things that we see in that executive kind of space.
Sounds great. So you've mentioned in that the one of the benefits of working with you is to reduce the risk of burnout. How does burnout play a role in the lives of your clients, and why is it that burnout is prevalent in the types of people that you're serving?
So, Hannah, some of the things that I work with, in most of the things that I work with my clients, is getting them to understand their self-sabotaging behaviors. And we've all got them. So there's not a single person in the world that doesn't have them, because they're baked into our survival mechanism from as human beings. And because of this kind of survival mechanism, we have what's called a tendency to have a negativity bias. And so what that means is that we will tend to err on recognizing the one negative thing that's gone on in our week, rather than the tens of thousands of amazing things that have happened in the week. The fact that we've all got water, running water, electricity, we've all got houses and food on our table, usually have good jobs, all that kind of thing. But we tend to index on that negativity bias a lot. So with executives, what you tend to find is a lot of executives are those type A leaders. They have, overachieving kind of qualities. They have perfectionist tendencies. Maybe they have controlling sort of tendencies. So these kind of behaviors, and there are many others as well, by the way, but they're just a few of them. And of course, we've all got what we know as that critic. Yeah. So whether we call it the judge or whether we call it the inner critic, but it's not just the inner critic, because it's also judging others. It's also judging circumstances and situations as well. So these are just a handful of the kind of key sort of self-sabotaging kind of archetypes, I would say, that I'm working with. And what the saboteurs in general will do is that, in my experience, all of us have got a limiting belief that we're not enough as we are. And so one of the first steps is to create awareness of, first of all, what is that dialogue that's going on in your head that is telling you X, Y, or Z? What are your unique strengths, gifts, and abilities as well? So what are the limiting beliefs? What are the self-sabotaging things that are going on? But also, what are the unique qualities that you have? And what happens when we're born? I believe that we're all born these beautiful, wonderful spiritual beings. And what happens is, in those formative years, we listen to our parents, the news, our teachers, video games, TV programs, social media now, and we absorb all the information from the outside world. And so, what did you used to hear when you were a child? Don't put your finger in the socket. Don't touch that. Your hand will get burnt. It's all a lot of don't do things and a lot of fear driven kind of like things. But that's very normal, because obviously your parents, when you're born, their main aim is to keep you alive. So their anxiety is kind of, is amplified when they have children, because the sense of responsibility of bringing up this young person. So what happens is that in our formative years, that's when the sabotaging behaviors start to get embedded in. So we form our kind of defense mechanisms, our coping mechanisms in those formative years. And then what happens is that we carry on with those things without really understanding or recognizing the psychology of what's happening to us. So when you're a senior executive, that achieving sense of, wanting to be the best, or to have a multi-million-pound business, or any kind of goals that you've got, it ends up being driven by the saboteur behaviors, as opposed to being driven by your kind of spiritual, grounded essence, consciousness kind of part. So when we are kind of when I'm working with someone, as I said, it's about creating that awareness, first of all, about all of those different elements. And then the sort of second part is to then start to work on weeding out those negative behaviors and reducing the self-sabotaging part, and increasing that consciousness part that we have, so that we are really kind of operating at that sort of rather than a push energy, I call it a pull energy. Okay, so something is pushing you, like, oh, come on, Annie, get up, you're lazy, go to the gym. That's a saboteur. Whereas if I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I really fancy a great workout today, that's the pulling energy. It's the inspiration. If I've got a function that I'm going to, and and I want to be as slim and trim as possible, I might motivate myself by saying, let's cut out all sugar for the next week and see how we get on with becoming even slimmer and trimmer. As opposed to the saboteur, which would say, oh, there you go again, you're on another diet, and there you go again, eating a piece of bread, that kind of thing. Just see how the dialogue is kind of different with the everyday sort of things that we do. One is kind of like pushing you and judging you and telling you that you're not kind of good enough in a way. And the other one is kind of like, oh, let's see how we get on with this, and see where it kind of takes us. So it's really helping the clients to understand those things for themselves, and to understand where they're pushing rather than pulling, and then really helping them to move into that sort of consciousness part more, and so that they are becoming better leaders, they are able to be more productive, they are able to have higher performance, but they're at the same time, they're increasing their self-care and their well-being, because they're reducing the effect of those saboteurs. So no longer do they need to stay till 8 o'clock in the evening to do their work. They now recognize they are worthy, they are respectful of their own time, and that they can put a hard stop on their workday, for example, but they'll be even more productive during their workday, because we've reduced the amount of that saboteur activity. Now, Hannah, we have up to 100,000 thoughts a day, And most of those are running in the unconscious and the subconscious. So Carl Jung says it really well. Until you bring the unconscious into the conscious, it will drive your life and you will call it fate. So that's why it's important to really, I definitely believe we are what we think, and what we think has the power to create our future reality. So if your script is running all the time with sort of negative thoughts and this judge and these kind of pushing kind of saboteur energy, then that's going to be what you're going to experience in life as well. So when you can get control of your mind, so that you're in charge of those thoughts, you choose which thoughts you're giving your time and energy to, then you are in control of how you experience life. You're increasing your self-care, you're increasing your well-being, whilst you're working less, but you're working smarter. Because imagine the amount of time and energy that most of us spend not being in the present moment, Hannah, where we are either we're either worrying about something that's going to happen in the future, or we're regretting something that's happened in the past, or we're just constantly making lists and plans of what's going on in our next week, the things that we have to do, all of those things. And imagine, and this is not a new concept, right? Everybody talks about this all the time, but imagine being in the present moment all of the time, where you're not being distracted by all these other thoughts and worries and fears. First of all, worrying is a complete waste of time. We don't even know if we're going to wake up in the morning, let's be frank. So what's the point of spending all that time worrying about some presentation that you've got next week when you're not enjoying this moment? And the more that you can ground into this moment, the more that you are able to then harness that energy, all of that energy that we waste on worry and fear, and which is all part of our survival mechanism, as I said. So the norm is for people to be 3-to-1 negativity bias. Okay. So the norm is for people to be a bit miserable and a bit moany and a bit complaining. Okay. So that's why working on our mental fitness, which is one of the key components of the work that I do with my clients, I work with mind, body, and spirit, but you have to work with the mind first, because until you've gotten control over what those thoughts are doing and how they're impacting you, you can't work with the body and the spirit, because that's the key to everything, is working with that. Did I explain that clearly to you, Hannah?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting one that you just said about working with the mind first and then the body. So just going off on a tangent here, when I started practicing yoga every day, initially I did it from I am going to do this. And an interesting twist that allowed me to be able to show up every day was that I no longer had kind of really rigid requirements as to what that was going to look like. When I was like, 2 minutes sitting on my mat and just sitting in peace counts as my daily practice, and another day it might be an hour and a half. So that giving myself freedom and permission was part of it. But also I found that the more that I showed up, the more I believed I was worthy of showing up, and that for me the action came before the belief. Like when I first started taking that action, I didn't really believe I was worthy of showing up for myself every day, but I was going to do it anyway. And the belief of me being worthy came later. So it was just experience that I had that was the order for me around my worthiness issue. So yeah, and you also touched on another question that I was going to ask you, which was about, you talk about increasing performance and enhancing productivity whilst also decreasing stress and burnout. And I was going to ask you, how do you get that balance, and how I think so many of us would hear those and think that they're kind of opposites, like the more productive you are, then surely you're under more stress or you're more likely to get burnout. So they feel like opposites. I don't believe that they are. And you've just explained why they're not opposites, because by being in the present moment, by bringing all that energy into the present moment, from like, don't worry about what's happening tomorrow, don't worry about the conversation from yesterday, just think about what you can do right now. And then that's how you bring more energy in, you're more productive, and you're not wasting all of that
energy on, especially on things that you can't control, like especially the amount of time people worry about stuff that they actually have no control over.
Exactly. And that's it. It's as simple as that. Look, we are wasting so much energy and time on thinking about, or dealing with things that we're either not in control of, or worrying, as I said, that worrying kind of energy. If you imagine that you just take all of that energy back and you divert it and redivert it and use your conscious part of your brain to utilize that, then you change that energy from reacting to creating. Okay, so what happens at the moment is that most people are reacting to all the stimuli all the time, but instead of reacting, we can just create. And so by taking our power back, it's taking our kind of energy back. How many people do you know that can't sleep at night, for example, because they get woken up with, oh, I've got this to do and I've got that to do? How many people do you know that have lots of different types of ways that they're kind of experiencing life, and it's because of that negativity bias, those saboteurs, those self-sabotaging behaviors that we've all got. Every single person in the world has got saboteurs, by the way, and that's what's kind of propelling us forward. So if you take back all of that, you empower yourself to be in control of your time and your energy, and you choose. And remember, we're making choices every day. You choose where you are then divesting that energy. That's why you can be more productive, because when you're in the present moment, you have greater focus, you have greater clarity, you're able to get the same amount of work done in half the amount of time. Because how many times do people look, I get this a lot with my leaders, I've got too much work to do, and I'm like, okay, how many times are you going off what you're doing to go and check your emails? Oh, regularly throughout the day. Okay, how many times are you checking your WhatsApp messages whilst you're working? Oh, regularly throughout the day. How much time are you spending on social media whilst you're also supposed to be working? Oh, regularly throughout the day. Well, of course, you're not going to be productive then, are you?
I mean, there's this myth around like multitasking and productivity.
There's no multitasking. Humans are not designed for multitasking.
Yeah.
I can't remember the stats now, but the human brain is only able to process a certain amount of information, bits of information per day or whatever, per second. We're giving it double the amount of information to process. So no wonder people are experiencing burnout. No wonder the youth of today is experiencing record levels of anxiety and stress that they've never experienced, because they've grown up with social media and all of the things that social media, pretend to give us, these ideal lifestyles. Well, nobody's really having those perfect lifestyles, but when you're on Instagram, it looks like everybody's having a fantastically perfect lifestyle. So it's the expectation there as well, and then the time that we're spending on these things, and then we're doing multiple things at the same time. We're not really designed for it. In Ayurveda, it's called air and space element, vata dosha, and everybody in the world, I think, in the Western world, has an excess of that vata dosha, that air and space element, because we're just doing so many things all at the same time. Yeah. But if you are able to set yourself some simple kind of habits, where when I was writing my book, for example, I had a rule that I would put all my notifications on mute. So, do not disturb and all that kind of thing. And I would not check my email, and I would sit down and I would have a period of time. I started off with a period of time, like 5 hours or something, that I would have to sit and write. And then I realized that I was also wasting my time sometimes. So then I said, okay, you're going to sit down for 5 hours and you've got to write at least 5,000 words in that 5 hours. And because I then became focused about it, I was able to get that book finished. But otherwise, of course, there are so many distractions in life. We can all be ridiculously distracted with many different things. So it's about creating that space for yourself to be properly productive.
100%. I agree with you. I think that we kid ourselves that we can multitask, because we can walk and talk. It is possible. We can brush our teeth and think about something else at the same time. But can we be truly focused? Can we bring our entire awareness to more than one thing? And the answer is no, because we are predominantly focused on the thought, not on the teeth brushing. We are predominantly focused on the conversation and not on the walking. Like, in fact, the brain isn't really fully focused on either of those. So yeah, I agree with you. And I think 100%, I can't remember what the numbers are, but if we're working on something and our phone pings and we're distracted and we go and look at the WhatsApp message or whatever it is, then we come back, it takes a period of time for our brain to re-enter that zone where we were truly focused and we know where we were. And so if you're allowing yourself to be distracted, however frequently the WhatsApp messages ping, multiply that by the amount of time that it takes for you to refocus again. And you've spent probably, potentially more than half of your time trying to refocus and not actually being productive. So I completely agree. And that when I was in corporate and I had a deliverable to produce, I would create that zone. I'd be like, right, I am blocking out my diary. I am just unavailable for 2 hours and I'm going to be completely like blinkers on. Don't even bother. There is nobody home. She is dedicated to the thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. I know. I mean, I'm just go back to when I was working in corporate as well. And whenever I would have working from home days, but back then, was not a norm like it is now. But whenever I would have working from home days, I realized that I would get through my entire day's worth of work in the first 2-3 hours of the day. And I realized how much time I was, quote unquote, wasting by hanging out and by the water cooler and chatting to people about last night's whatever, and then just wandering around and then going for lunch. And so it's like, okay, so actually we can actually do a lot more in a shorter period of time when you're properly focused and don't have those distractions.
Yeah, completely. My office days were in the minority, but I would basically write them off for getting any work done. They were social events. They were like reconnecting with the team. They were to help other people work through whatever stuff's going on for them, but they were not going to be a day of productivity for me. It was, yeah. Exactly. So I know that you've had some significant life events which have altered your course. And I thought it would be interesting for you to share a little bit about those experiences and how they show up in how you work with people, like how that showed up in how you're motivated, what your mission is. How do those life events show up in what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, so I have survived a tsunami as well as a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. So the 2004 Asian tsunami, the big one, the world's largest natural disaster of our lifetime, I survived. And one of the things that happened as a result of that, so I was interviewed by Oprah because I managed to remember the number of the BBC switchboard from when I worked there as a journalist 5 years before on this remote peninsula on the east coast of Sri Lanka, which I was able to remember their number. So I got press coverage on our plight and I got them to get in touch with the British High Commission, who rescued us the following day by sending choppers in, because where we were, the bridge was taken out that connected us to the mainland in the 5th wave, and the east coast of Sri Lanka was the second worst hit after Banda Aceh. So because of that, and because I had kind of led the relief effort, and even though I was in the tsunami myself and had gotten us to safety, I was invited onto the Oprah Winfrey Show to talk about my story. And one of the things that I said to Oprah at the time is, I know that I must have been saved for a purpose, but I don't know what that is now. And we need to make our lives mean something and count for something, because it's a miracle that anyone survived. And almost 250,000 people died. We weren't one of them. And so I had this great sense of responsibility. It stemmed from my survivor guilt, to be honest. So it kind of came from survivor guilt, which is quite common in those kind of circumstances. But this kind of like second lease at life really gave me a kind of like a motivation to think, what is this purpose I was saved for? I actually do believe that the soul comes here to do or learn certain things or to remember certain things. And so the fact that I didn't die was an indication to me. My soul was kind of saying to me, or my intuition was saying to me, you're not done yet. There's something you have to do here first. And so that really kind of kept me going. I ended up in the war in Iraq a couple of years later, working for an NGO to deliver projects and programs to people that were being displaced by the war. I was quite anti the war in Iraq at the time, and an opportunity came up for me to use my project skills in Iraq in the red zone, which was kind of scary. But I think this whole thing about this purpose was really driving, and also my self-sabotaging behaviors was slightly driving these things as well. It's like, okay, I don't feel worthy. So, how can I make myself feel worthy? I have to do good things in the world, that kind of thing. I hope now it's turned into a not a sabotaging thing. It's more of a positive consciousness thing. But it served its purpose at the time. And then when I came back to work as the head of projects for the UK's largest charity. So, I kind of moved away from corporate into kind of the charity sort of sector. And I thought maybe this is it. But then the cancer diagnosis came along whilst I was actually working for Cancer Research UK, which I thought was quite ironic. I just left there, actually. I just finished working there. And then I kind of was like, why have I got diagnosed with cancer at such a young age? I was only in my 30s at the time. I know it's very common these days, but this was 15 years ago now. So we're talking some time ago. So it wasn't as common then. And again, because I have that mind, body, spirit kind of connection, and I believe in that, I kind of just knew that something had gone wrong between the mind, body, spirit connection for me to have been diagnosed with cancer at such a young age. And so I went on a journey of self-discovery, I would say, in that period of time. I left work because I recognized that my work was quite stressful, and I decided to do lots of complementary and alternative therapies because I didn't really want to do chemo. And so I kind of traveled the world, and every kind of alternative or complementary therapy that I was doing for myself, whether it was yoga, meditation, mindfulness, Ayurveda, hypnotherapy, acupuncture, I then decided to become a practitioner in it. Not necessarily to help others at that time. It was just for my own healing. But by the end of this 5-year diagnosis of a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, I had gone into a spontaneous remission after the stage 4. And I had all these kind of qualifications to hand by then. And what happened was that people that knew me were inspired by my story. They were inspired by the way that I'd chosen to do things. And they had been following me for some time. So they started gravitating to me for advice, support. And while I was supporting them, I actually said to one of these people, I said, have you spoken to your therapist about this? And they said to me, no, to be honest, the support and advice and the talks that I've been having with you have been more helpful than my US qualified therapist. So I that's when I had my light bulb moment, and I was like, well, of course, Annie, you survived a tsunami, you've just survived a cancer diagnosis, 2 recurrences, by the way, and a stage 4. So all of the things that any cancer patient is terrified of, which is recurrences and also stage 4, I had all of them, survived them all, was in remission. So I was like, of course, you've had these experiences. I felt like I'd had these experiences because I was meant for bigger things, right? I was meant to have some purpose in this life. And so I kind of used all of those qualifications, did some coaching qualifications as well as NLP as well, and started to work as a coach. And then I sort of shortly after realized that I loved working with people that were similar to myself when I was working in corporates and the charities, sort of high achieving, go-getting type A type personalities. So I kind of niched into that executive coaching market. And, and obviously, as someone that's had cancer at a young age, I'm passionate about people's well-being. I'm passionate about people taking care of themselves whilst at the same time being happy, peaceful, purpose-driven, joyful, all of these kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I got tingles when you were describing some of that. So in particular, I think there's so much power in somebody who's in the midst of all of that to be talking to somebody who's been through it. And when they say, I see you and I get where I have an understanding of where you are. We're all unique. So there will be elements that we can never quite put ourselves in somebody's shoes, but to be able to say, this is my experience and I've made it to where I am, that means you can be an inspiration. You're able to understand them, that you're able to. Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently who has lost their father, and I lost my dad just last year. So I was just able to have a conversation in a different way than I would have been able to if she had lost her father before I'd lost mine. There's something about talking to somebody who's been through it. They really get it. And so I can see that, just by being you and having had the experiences you've had, you could really hold a conversation in a space for people, let alone the gazillions of different modalities that you've trained in.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, is by far, I've had like 3 near-death experiences, survived the tsunami, all this cancer stuff that I told you about. I don't know anyone else, and certainly not any of my clients, who have had any worse circumstances happen in their life than I have. I had a very difficult childhood as well. There was, there was violence in the childhood too. So I've had all of the sort of traumas that a lot of people, might have 1 or 2 of those traumas. I've had seemingly a half a dozen or more. So I really can come from the perspective, and my father passed away 1 week after we told him about my cancer diagnosis. So on top of all of that, I also had that to contend with as well. So and I've spent decades of my life being hijacked by my saboteurs, my feelings of unworthiness. I call him Pete Paranoia, who was always spinning these web of lies, and that I was this, not worthy and not loved and all this, that sort of thing, which, given that, I had a parent that was kind of violent growing up, it's normal for a child to think there's something wrong with them than to think there's something wrong with the parent. So I understand where all of that stuff comes from. And of course, it gives me a great deal of empathy and understanding for other people's pain and problems and challenges that they're facing. So I've definitely feel like I've walked in people's shoes, and I do think that, it is inspiring for people to see somebody that has had so many, quote unquote, challenges or knocks in their life, to then be thriving and to use that as a platform for speaking and for podcasts and for group work and coaching and all of the things that I do. That makes me feel, it really does change that sort of darkness, that kind of dark energy that I had to really contend with, into this very light kind of thing, and into love and light, which is what I'm all about. So I am actually grateful for all of the difficult challenges that I've had to face in my life, because I definitely wouldn't be the person I am today without them all. And it's one of my superpowers, being insightful and intuitive with my clients, being able to have this really great psychology understanding of people, and utilizing all of that for their benefit. I wouldn't, I give thanks to my father all the time now. He was, the difficult one, because without that kind of like upbringing, it wouldn't have created the strength and resilience that I had to deal with the tsunami. There's no way that I would have been organizing the relief effort and thinking about calling the tsunami, calling the BBC, while surviving the tsunami and having nearly drowned myself multiple times, if I hadn't already had the resilience from when I was a child. So I really want your listeners to also take away from this that, I do actually believe every challenge is an opportunity for growth. And so long as you don't let it sink you, because for my formative years, and even until, I'd say into my 40s, it was really kind of like sinking me. I felt like I was drowning the whole time. But when you've got a handle on it, you really can thrive and swim through and surf those waves of life, so that you you know, that you can get the most out of life, and you can experience more joy, more peace, more purpose than you've ever experienced before.
So based on all of that, and you may have already covered this in some of what you've just described, what do you think is your core message for the world? What's your core message for everybody, and what's your mission now?
So core message, I think I just said, you know, it's that every challenge is an opportunity for growth. I also like to say, you know, what if in your darkest hour you find your greatest strengths? Okay, and then reframing those kind of quote unquote negative things that have happened to us. And my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower over 250,000 leaders to have a positive impact in the world and live their lives with purpose, joy, and mental freedom, peace. And that is in honor of the same number of people that died in the tsunami. And I like to do that by forging a path together to unite a community of leaders that we can then create this wave of positive change in the world, so that the leaders are both learners and teachers as well, and that we co-create this legacy, creating a ripple effect of impact and creating a movement where each of us makes the world a better place. So it's not just me. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to touch 250,000 people's lives, but every leader that I work with, their families are impacted, their teams are impacted. I have one client, for example, whenever I go to her offices, her team bow down to me in reverence, because having helped that leader has helped the entire team. So that's how, you know, together we're working on really creating this ripple effect that I'm wanting to go out into the world. And that would then make everything that I have been through, I mean, it already feels worthwhile, put it this way. You know, I'm already very amazed by the impact that I've had and touched the people's lives that I've impacted. So any more than that is just even more, you know. So yeah, I just think it's that you got to think of you know, what we've got to remember is we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Okay, and we tend to get caught up in the minutiae detail of our jobs, or, you know, the kind of the things that aren't really that important in a way. You know, I mean, it is important if it's your purpose and all that kind of thing, but what I'm saying is these executives will over index on one thing, like work, for example, to the detriment of everything else. And it is a bit of a distraction, to be honest, you know, because what you've got to do is you've got to then keep coming. Once you've done the mindset work, you've then got to come into the body, and then you've got to come into the spirit as well, and the soul, and what is really driving, you know, what are you really here for, and how are you going to fulfill your purpose, and, you know, what is a fulfilling life for you look like, and not just from the egoic point of view, but from that true kind of spiritual and soulful perspective. And you don't have to be religious or spiritual to believe that we have a spirit or a soul. We've all had moments where we have been attuned to it. We've all had that voice in our head that sounds like it's coming from somewhere else, you know. So I'm not suggesting that you have to be super religious or spiritual to be able to understand this, but as somebody that has had near-death experiences, I have gone to the other side. We do not die. Okay, your body dies, but your spirit, your soul, your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is still there. So, and I know that for a fact because I've experienced it. So I've experienced the whole looking down at your body, you know, the floating up, the kind of being clinically dead for a few moments, and then realizing, oh, that actually this body kind of vessel that we're in is not who we are. Okay, we are more than that. So if you try to remember those things and take some solace from the fact that, you know, there are many experiences of people that have had near death that tell very similar stories, of people coming to meet you, you know, the white light, all of that happened. So you know, and hopefully that helps people to not be so scared about things as well, because we're kind of eternal.
So yeah, we've we've ended up on a topic that I wasn't expecting to go here, but given that we are here, there's a great book, and I will put the full details in the show notes. It was written by a neuroscientist, or I think in fact he was a brain surgeon, who had explained away with science his patients' experiences, and was probably a little condescending, like, yes, dear, of course that's what you saw, of course that's what you experienced, but didn't believe it. And he had his own explanation of how the brain was operating, what the brain was doing, and the fact that he believed that as the brain came back online, it created a story for that period where it wasn't operating, or something along those lines. Anyway, he talks about it in the book. He then went on to have a near-death experience, and it was very significant. And there's a big twist in his story. I won't ruin the story by telling you what that twist is, but it really proved to him, and I think it's called Map of Heaven, but I'll put the full details of the book, because his being such a skeptic and coming from such a scientific background to now being a complete convert and writing books about what happens on the other side, it's a great book.
But there's another one that's similar as well, which is Many Lives, Many Masters, written by a psychiatrist, Harvard graduate, very science driven. And he then his patients started to have spontaneous regressions. And the book is basically kind of an account of all of that. And but he was, again, a very sort of science driven person, didn't believe in all of this kind of stuff. And then when he was working with this patient, basically she downloaded loads of information to him, which is all written in that book, in case your readers your listeners want to read it.
I've heard of it before, but I haven't read it. So we touched earlier on your diverse set of modalities, so a few. You've mentioned a few, so here's a few. So you've done coaching, you've done Ayurveda, you've done EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, for those who haven't heard of it, breath work, and there's a whole load more, but they're so diverse. What do you feel, which one of all those modalities do you feel that the world needs to know more about?
If there's one thing that people need to know about, it's mindfulness and meditation. Okay. So meditation is the act of sitting down and meditating. Mindfulness is being mindful of what you're thinking and feeling in every moment of every day. So the meditation is kind of like the vehicle by which you start to be mindful throughout your day. Okay. But mindfulness is the number one thing that I would say for people is the most important thing. It is through meditation, and meditation is the most effective method of doing this, that you shift your neuroplasticity from that surviving part of the brain. There are two hemispheres of the brain. One is the surviving part, which is where the negativity bias is, and we've got the 3-to-1 kind of ratio, versus the consciousness part, the thriving part of the brain. That meditation is what will help you to actually change your neuro pathways. So change your neuroplasticity. What do I mean by that? You will delete pathways that are hanging around in your surviving brain. You will create new pathways that are in your thriving brain. Look, I've told you quite a bit about my background, and I can tell you that I was operating in my survival brain for a large period of time. For most of my life, I was in my survival brain. Now I can tell you that I'm definitely operating from my thriving brain. How did I change? Well, for years, I couldn't find what the key was. I didn't know how you change these things. I'd been to therapists, I'd been to psychotherapists, hypnotherapists, you name it, I'd done it, I tried it. And honestly, it is the meditation that changes it. And if there's so much science available, if you do a brain MRI image at the beginning of your journey, there's a course that you do with me as well, which is, that you also change your neuroplasticity. But if you were to do a brain MRI imaging at the beginning and then brain MRI imaging at the end, you would see changes in the whole way that your brain is structured. Okay. So that's how. If there's one thing, and I get that people are like, oh no, not meditation again, mindfulness, oh no, I just, not for me, I can't sit still. You need to sit still, sorry, but you do. And the thing is you can be mindful. If you don't like sitting down on the mat for 10 minutes a day, which, let's face it, none of my executives have got the time to do that, you can bring mindfulness into your everyday life through observing everything that you're doing on a daily basis through moment by moment. Let's say you go for a walk. Instead of mindlessly tuning out and, you know, thinking about all the things that you've got to do later, be completely present. Notice the birds singing, notice the temperature of the air, notice the flowers in people's gardens, notice how your feet feel on the floor. You've done your meditation. That's meditation. That's kind of like moving meditation, of you being present. All that meditation or mindfulness is being in this moment right now.
Yep. I could applaud. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of meditation, but also to expand people's thoughts of what meditation is, because I don't think that sitting in silence is an easy task, especially given that we are, as you said earlier, bombarded by so much information. It's really hard. And I don't feel like that's the best place for a beginner to start in their meditation journey. Like, there's so many ways of meditating, like breath work incorporated into meditations, or I also like chanting meditations. So there are just so many ways. And I think it's a shame when people hear meditation and they think they have to be all Zen-like and sit on top of a mountain in silence or something, and it's just not going to work, you know?
Exactly. And the thing is, let me just debunk a meditation myth for you. Nobody sits there and has no thoughts going through their head. Okay, this whole thing about, oh, meditation is about emptying your mind. I'm sorry, it's not about emptying your mind. It's about being present with everything that's going on for you. Okay, that means being aware of the thoughts that are going on in your mind, but not reacting to them. It means being aware of the temperature of your skin, but not feeling like you have to put the heating up, or, you know, or take clothes off if you're hot or cold. So not reacting again. It's not about emptying your mind, because the mind isn't made to be thinking. Okay, so it's just about noticing that your mind's wandered off to something, and then go, oh, right, okay, let me come back to the breath. Or, like I said, I like to get people to integrate mindfulness into their day. You're loading the dishwasher. Take a few moments to really notice how the plates feel against your hand, the sounds of when you're loading the dishwasher, when you're brushing your teeth, for example. Instead of thinking about your to-do list or thinking about doing something else, be completely present with the sensations of brushing your teeth. You know, the feet grounded on the floor, the foam in the mouth, the experience of the brush against the teeth, the sound if you're doing electric toothbrushing, you know, all of these things, the sound of the running water. Then you've done a couple of minutes of meditation. That's it. You know, you don't have to go and sit on a mat and lotus position. I can't even get into lotus position, you know, and do like 20 minutes of meditation like that. Just take a few minutes throughout your day to be mindful, to ground into this moment. I think it's better to do 2 to 10 minutes regularly throughout the day, where you're just bringing your attention to the present moment, so that, because that's how you charge up your kind of thriving part of the brain. Because let's say you do have a meditation practice and you do 20 minutes of meditation in the morning. By the time you've gone to work, let's say you're in London and you're traveling on the tube, by the time that you've gone to work, you know, your charge into your thriving part of the brain is already kind of depleted down to maybe 50% instead of 100%. So, you know, again, you know, if you then get into work and then just do another couple of minutes of mindfulness things, you know, we call them PQ reps maybe, then, you know, positive quotient reps. It's just like going to the gym. Physical fitness is lifting weights. This is mental fitness. And this is about, you know, creating those moments of calm and quietness throughout your day. Let's say, for example, you get on the tube, though, you manage to get a seat, and then you choose to just sit there without scrolling on your phone and observe everything that's going on around you, or observe your breath moving in and out of your body. Then again, you're being mindful. So you've done a few more reps again, and you've charged up your brain again. But you need to do it regularly throughout the day, because your charge kind of goes down as the day progresses. So 2 to 10 minutes regularly throughout the day, and you're golden. Nobody needs to sit on a mat in silence if that's not their thing.
I love that. Thank you. So let's just wrap this up with one last question for you, which is, what are you working on? What's happening for you? What are you motivated by in 2024, 25? What are you up to?
So I'm always motivated by my mission, which is to hit that 250,000 positive impact. And this year, my book is going to be coming out. My book is called Tsunami, The Wave That Saved My Life, and it will be published hopefully by the summer. So that's kind of in production at the moment. So that's very exciting. I am off to do a masterclass for a brand on purpose. So look out for that. That's going to be for the Rituals brand. For those of us in Europe, you may have heard of the Rituals brand, a luxury wellness affordable brand, that I'm going to be doing that with them. And continuing, I've got a number of different groups that I'm doing mental fitness programs with, corporate groups. I'm doing big groups all the way from Vancouver to New Zealand and Australia. I've got people, which is very exciting. So I'm doing my mental fitness training with them. I've got speaking events lined up as well, and more podcasts, interviews as well. And I'm really hoping that the book becomes a bestseller, so that the message that I'll be sharing in the book, which is a lot of what I've talked about here, goes into a lot more detail, obviously, about my tsunami story and my cancer story, the lessons that I learned, the kind of key messages that I have taken away, so that you too can kind of, it is a memoir. So it's a memoir of my life from the tsunami until sort of like a couple of years ago, sort of thing. So it is a memoir, and it just is me talking about my story and how I learned the lessons and what I did, and in a lot more detail than I can go into in a podcast here. So
Great.
Yeah.
You sound super busy, all with good, inspiring, fun stuff. That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. If you've got any final thoughts or messages for everybody listening, feel free to share them. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Annie.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Just that, if you are struggling with whatever challenges you're facing at the moment, I do hope that you found this listen to be helpful to you, to be inspiring for you, to know that you too can and will overcome these challenges. Just persevere and, get the support that you need. And, there is, you can thrive and you can really experience the best life that you've ever experienced. So I just want you to know that, and to not lose heart, because there's been many times where I felt like I was losing heart. So please take it from me that you can and you will overcome these things.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you want to find out more about Annie's work, then you can check out her website at www.ultimateresultsgroup.com. That's ultimateresultsgroup.com. She's also on Instagram. You'll find her at Annie Naqvi. She's on LinkedIn, and I will include the links that I've just mentioned, along with a link to her Facebook group, in the show notes. Thank you for being part of Burnout Isn't Necessary. Our aim is to assist you in navigating stress and preventing burnout. If you found our conversations valuable, please consider subscribing and taking a moment to rate the podcast. Your feedback is essential. I want to hear from you. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, share them with me. Your input can shape the content that we create. A common question I receive is where to start in managing stress, and everything starts with awareness. Stress impacts each of us in a unique way, and some stress symptoms can seem a little random, so I've created a checklist of symptoms to help you better understand how stress shows up for you. There's a link in the show notes. And a quick reminder, this podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional advice. Stay tuned for more episodes, and until next time, take care of yourself.